All right, guys, I don't really have a voice, so I'm sorry. We're going to listen to As Fast as Words Could Fly, the excerpt. Make sure you're following along in front of you. It says, this is a story about Mason, a boy who grew up during the civil rights movement. His dad wasn't educated, so Mason helped his dad write business letters to President Lyndon B. Johnson from the civil rights group his dad worked with. Mason was given a typewriter. I'm going to make it smaller, sorry. A typewriter for all of his hard work from the group. School buses, water fountains, etc. were still segregated. Summer flew by. Before we knew it, Mason started his first year of high school. After the third week, Pa called him and his brothers into the kitchen one evening. "Boys, I got some real important news for you," he began. "We just won a case we've been fighting for a long time. It ain't right for you all to be bused 12 miles to Bethel Union High School when Bellevue High ain't but 3 miles away." The boy's eyes widened. "Pa, you know them white folks ain't gonna like us going to their school not one bit," Willis Jr. stammered. "Like it or not, y'all's going," Pa replied. "Somebody's got to make a change." Monday morning, Mason and his brothers were nervous. They watched the school bus come roaring up the road. The driver slowed down just enough for the boys to see the white students on the bus laughing at them. Then they sped up, blowing the dust in the boys' faces. "They just don't want us on their bus," Willis Jr. said. The next day, the same thing happened. The third day, the bus stopped. "Move it! I ain't got all day," the driver yelled, "and get to the back." The boys stumbled over one another as they hustled down the aisle. When the boys arrived at Bellevue High, the principal, Mr. Burlock, barricaded the doorway. He looked as if he smelled a skunk. "Report to call after the bell rings," he snapped, and thrust their schedules towards them. "How will we know where to go?" Willis Jr. asked. "You found a way to get here, so find your way around." Mr. Burlock turned and stormed into the building. Against all odds, Mason did well in school. He especially liked typing class. The teachers, Mrs. Roberts, ignored him, but he paid strict attention when she helped others. At home, Mason practiced what he had learned. It wasn't long before he needed some money to buy typing paper and other supplies. Mason found out that the Neighborhood Youth Corps sponsored an after-school program that offered jobs. He applied and received a position in the school library. "What can you do, boy?" Mrs. Turner, the librarian, asked. "I can type, ma'am," Mason answered. Mason had to transfer the information on the spines of books onto cards. 2 hours later, Mrs. Turner approaches Mason. "How's it coming, boy?" she demanded. Mason handed her a stack of index cards. Mrs. Turner's eyes bulged. "My goodness! How many cards did you type?" "I think about 100, ma'am." The first time Mason used the electric typewriter, the letters jumped onto the paper with the slightest touch. He had to get used to pressing the button to return to the left margin of his paper. He could type faster and more quietly on the electric typewriter, but he missed the tinging bell on the manual typewriter and signaled a new line. Mason continued to improve his typing skills. Then Mason was fired without explanation. "They done messed with the wrong fella," Pa fumed. The next morning, Golden Frank's Pa in the civil rights movement went to the Board of Education. Mason was rehired shortly after. One day in typing class, Mrs. Roberts announced that there was going to be a typing tournament among some of the high schoolers in the country. The fastest typist in the world in the class would represent Bellevue High. Mason Steele would represent our school, she said. "How can a Negro represent our school?" students blurted out. "We can't afford any more trouble with the Board of Education," Mr. Burlock responded, stealing a glance at Mason. "Do I really want to do this?" Mason thought, but then he recalled Pa's words. Somebody's got to make a change. He tried to ignore the stares of the white students as he considered the selection of electric and manual typewriters. Mason knew if he chose a manual one, he would lose time. He closed his eyes to think. His typewriter at home flashed before him. Mason sat down at the manual typewriter. Tap, 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 ding. Mason's fingers flew over the keys. Time's up, the judge yelled. All eyes were on Mason as the judge collected the papers. I can't believe this. I really can't believe this, the judge said in the microphone. Mason Steele from Bellevue High has broken all previous records with a typing speed of 65 words per minute. No one cheered. Mr. Burlock accepted the typing champion plaque for Bellevue High. Not a single person in the audience applauded. Mason received nothing. I just have one question, Mr. Burlock said. Why in the world did you choose a manual typewriter? Because it reminded me of where I come from, sir. Okay, work on the multiple choice.